to really focus on encouraging the things. So as a reader, you might see glimmers of what the writer can't see yet. So for me, the notion of the critical friend is to say, look at those buds, look at the. Have you noticed those flowers? Have you noticed what's happening?
Are we going to share this as a raw uh, engagement, or are we going to use the time together today to think about what might be most useful for the encouraging the contributors to think about critical friendship as they are developing their writing for the journal?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my wonderings about it was if we just recorded something, then Fizzer and Erica might be able to edit it to fit their need or fit the need as they perceive it. So that was one bit of thinking, and the other bit of thinking was that the word critical is an interesting one, and it's like. I meet the problem with clinical supervision, with the word supervision, all of the time.
Yeah.
And the only bit of thinking I did, because clearly I understand it and you understand it, and it's a very helpful process. But the word critical can get in the way.
Yes.
But I was thinking about critical care. And how nobody would look at critical care and think that was anything other than a very particular and useful way of looking after people. And so I was thinking if we could convey critical is in the most benign, not benign, better than benign. It's the most positive thing. It's critical in the most positive way. So that was my thinking before coming on the call.
Yes, and if we could convey that you know, I mean, I wondered about the use of when I started writing about the notion of critical friendship, quite a few years ago. I wondered whether critical could be a barrier to encouraging people to engage with each other in a way that is both supportive and thought-provoking, with a view to helping their writing to shine. And I in my own mind, I understood critical obviously to have these negative connotations which come with analytical and academic and perhaps even crushing or blaming and all those kinds of things. But of course, it also means essential, and it means caring and careful. Yeah. So you know, I've always sort of wondered about the kind of positive and negative connotations of the term critical. But in the end, I thought I'd stick with it. I mean, I've sometimes been thought about changing it to something else, but the idea of critical friendship for me, which is both the requisite amount of challenge and support with the best of intentions and with the view of enabling the other person's writing to shine, or indeed practice to shine if it's not writing, that does credit to their original contribution and their uniqueness. But you're right, I think that the term critical can be a possible barrier, can't it? But if we could find a way of encouraging people to think about it in a positive sense, in an enabling sense, then that would be a step forward. It also occurred to me that in this particular instance, with this edition of the journal, using the term that you have introduced in your book, that it may be that the contributors are still in the winter season. They're still warming up to the project and to each other and to us, within the editorial team and so on. And if we can sort of start some thawing and warming, and also not to make it seem like a big heavy deal, that it's actually a form of support and friendship. So I don't know what you think might help that process.
So that took me to thinking about the notion of icebreakers in groups, and I've got a kind of love-hate relationship with them, because on one level they can speed things up a little bit and get things moving, and they can be very effective. On the other hand, all of my experience of every winter I've lived through, spring comes along anyhow. It does. There is a natural warming, so it's maybe a little bit about allowing this process to unfold, and with a confidence that it will, that the buds will appear, that the snowdrops are already here, the daffodils are arriving, and not to trample on those. And so as people's first attempts come out, to really focus on encouraging the things. So as a reader, you might see glimmers of what the writer can't see yet. So for me, the notion of the critical friend is to say, look at those buds. Look at have you noticed those flowers? Have you noticed what's happening? And to play the part of because in the writing that I've recently done, I'm now getting feedback from people on things I hadn't really thought of.
Yes.
Even though I've lived with this piece of writing for years,
Yes.
And that dual process of writer reader, reader writer, right?
Yes.
And that cross pollination, really. Yeah.
Well, yes. So there's that, and there's also the other aspect of the kind of, I don't know whether reciprocity is the right word, or mutuality, or shared insight and learning that comes when an author is working with a critical friend, or a critical friend is working with an author. There's mutual benefit, there's mutual gain, there's mutual insight, and so there's a degree of democracy that's involved in this. It's not an expert sort of apprentice thing in any way whatsoever.
No.
And so if you have A and B, one being the main author, and B being the person who's accompanying them in their project, their writing project, B learns as much from A in the process of A drafting and sharing their emerging ideas. And the conversation that can happen between them is inspiring and energizing, and the relationship between writing and conversation is a very powerful process. The two feed into each other constantly, backwards and forwards, or in all sorts of ways. So if there's a fear of hierarchy, it does not, or it should not exist with critical friends. So the author is a critical friend to the critical friend as much as the critical friend is a critical friend to the author. And of course, two authors working together are also playing the role of critical friends to each other. And moreover, it doesn't have to be just a dyadic relation. It doesn't have to be just two people. You can have you work with critical friends on different aspects of your writing, or if you have a particular issue or problem that's nagging away at you. You're not stuck with just one person. Ideally, you have a reservoir of people that you can go to and trust. And trust, I think, is the most important aspect of it.
Yeah, I think it is. And the trust in the goodwill is more important than the trust in this other person will know.
Yes,
really.
And it's not so the critical friend doesn't have to be an expert or knowledgeable in the field. That they give the author an opportunity to speak, to give voice, and they listen. The very act of listening, and again, you say this in your book, as a facilitator, it's a facilitative process, just to be still and listen and pay active attention to the other person's ideas, hesitancies, and so on. And in the act of responding to that listening, the author, understands or clarifies and gets a sense of what it is they want to say. It's giving space and an opportunity.
I just think that made me think is at the beginning of the process, it's helping people to get going and articulate stuff, and then later in the process, it's getting people to edit it down. So in a way, that's I think about facilitation. The two hardest things in groups is get people to start talking and get people to stop talking. It's the same process in writing, I think. And I remember when we co-edited a couple of editions a couple of years ago, and I remember there was one or two of the authors who would have a full page where a paragraph would have done.
Yes.
And others who had a sentence where a paragraph was needed. And it's just and so the critical became different in that it was a kind of guidance. There was still not hierarchical, but definitely a guiding hand in saying, do you could you say more about this, or
yes.
Could you edit this?
Yes.
This might look better if you. And partly helping the writer to look after the reader, so not leaving big gaps that you could drive a bus through, but not going on.
Yes. Well, I sometimes think about the process of writing as going through kind of three spaces. So the initial space can often be a private space where you write to and for yourself. And then at some point, that could move into either a semi-private or a semi-public space where you write for a chosen and trusted audience. And it seems to me that that's where the critical friend, particularly, or critical friends, plural, can play a role. They occupy that semi-public, semi-private space because they offer an audience, a limited or safe audience to the contributor or the author, where they can test some of that emerging writing, which the author can then take back and reflect on and so on, and gain confidence in moving the writing to, if you like, the third space, which is the public space, which is when the writing is released into the universe. And at that point, of course, there's no more control. When you send your book out, you are bound. People will read it in any way they want to, and obviously, as an author, with the help sometimes of a critical friend, you're able to try at least to influence the way that the public will read your book, but ultimately knowing that when it's out there, you have no more control over it. You've set it free. So it's almost I don't know whether this works or not, but I like to imagine that the critical friends occupy that semi-private, semi-public space where there's still room to redraft and change and add ideas or to take ideas away, preparing it for the publication if it's writing, or the video or whatever it is, to go out, have a life of its own. So maybe it's a bit like, children growing up, and, the analogy of, how do parents prepare their children to go out into the world? And no, I won't take that analogy too far, but in a way, I don't know if you feel this about your recent book, whether you feel it's you've given birth to something, or it's your offspring.
Well, yeah, absolutely, and I'm thinking in terms of looking after these writers, the fear of showing oneself in public. I think we've talked about this before, and even the most experienced people hold that fear. And I'm not saying it's universal, but I wonder whether it's universal, because there is a distinct part of the writing process that when you go into that public space, whether it's about control or fear of criticism, fear of getting it wrong, or being publicly shamed, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing I've enjoyed about working with this particular journal is that people are genuinely helped by personal contact, workshops, critical friendship. All manner of different possibilities are available to people. Mm. I'm sure it's not unique to this journal, but it's particular to this journal. So it's like conveying that we understand that we understand it, we understand it, we understand it from within. We really, I really get that. It is a boundary, a threshold to be crossed.
Yes.
And ultimately, you have to decide whether you want to cross that one.
Yes.
And maybe that's back to a personal decision, but a personal supported decision.
Mm-hmm. So going back to this notion of the formation of relationships, because critical friendship is a special kind of relationship, isn't it? And the stereotypical notion of writers is that they work alone in their attic, up in their garret, working away, not seeing anybody, just them and the page or the screen or whatever it is. And yet, there are aspects of writing which have a social aspect to them, and they may be quite rare opportunities, but it is an opportunity, like we try to do in the writers group, for example, to talk about writing, or to talk about writing issues, and possibly to do a bit of writing at the same time. And if we can move from that, frozen, wintry scenario, gradually thawing out into a spring where bulbs are shooting up, snowdrops and crocuses, as they are doing at the moment, and then coming into full flower, and going through a kind of seasonal cycle in a way. And I think, the notion of critical friendship as a warm relationship, a warming relationship, warming to the task, warming to the writing, warming to the project, developing confidence, and feeling supported. Feeling that what you have to say is worth saying, and knowing that you're going to get a chance to say it well. And giving voice. I don't know about you, Steve, but I got the impression, and certainly from previous conversations and in reading your book, that initially there was a bit of ambivalence and hesitation about whether we should be putting pen to paper in the first place. What am I doing? And yet writing is such a powerful way of developing understanding, insight, almost a sort of personal research in what I think and feel, and what I want to say, and what I would like to share, if only I had the confidence to do it. And then with the continuing dedication to that, or commitment to that, confidence does grow, and that's part of the role of the critical friend. Just to say yes, I'm here. Speak to me, write to me, and it's coming out. When we start, we often don't quite know what we're going to say, do we? Mm-hmm. So we have to rehearse, we have to practice, and having somebody who is providing that audience in the formative stages of it helps to give shape to the final whatever it is that is produced.
Yeah, that's entirely been my experience. I love the idea of it being a warming relationship. It's a warm relationship, and it's warming. And to complete it in the autumn, that's where you take in the harvest and you see what you've got, and that's the final product. And it's final only in the sense of it's this year's final product. If you wrote the same thing again next year, it wouldn't be the same thing again next year. It will have its variations.